What is going on, guys? Joe Hodge here with Cooking with Joe. I'm so excited about this. So, what we are making today is sweet potato mash with sirloin round cuts, which basically is just a big circle of sirloin, juicy sirloin that's going to be put on top of the sweet potato mash. Kind of in the season of Thanksgiving, you know, the sweet potato, that's very Thanksgiving-y, and steak, not so Thanksgiving-ish, but still it has Thanksgiving flair to it. So I'm going to start. So what we're going to do in order to make sweet potato mash, which is mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, is we got to boil the sweet potatoes and cook them, otherwise you're going to be mashing rocks. So I'm going to take the sweet potatoes, we're going to peel them first. That's what we're going to do. We're going to peel them into a bowl where it's just going to be skinless, a skinless sweet potato, and we're going to cut them into quarters so it's easier and faster to boil. I'm going to boil in a large pan, which I have right here. And so I'm going to get started. I'm going to start peeling my sweet potatoes. I'm actually going to realistically do it over here so it's quicker. So now, as you see, we have very nice two-peeled sweet potatoes that we're going to start to boil with about 12 to 14 cups of water, depending on the size of the pan. You know, you can fill it up. You got to fill it up to you got to fill it up properly to where the potatoes are covered with water. Boil it. Season the water with salt. No need for pepper. And then when it's very fork tender, which means you poke it and it's really mushy, not overcooked, but it's just the right consistency, you can start to make it into the mashed sweet potatoes, and that's where the steak will sit. Steak's going to be fun to cook. So I'm going to let that fill up with water while I describe the meat I chose today. Like I said, 2 sirloin cuts. You can pat the juices off. The little known fact, the little stuff that you might think is blood is actually packing liquid that they preserve the meat with. Really high quality butchers, when they butcher it in front of you, won't have packing liquid. But the stuff that looks like blood is actually the stuff they pack it in. So dab that off, get it dry, and yeah. Alright, is you want to get your pan nice and hot, because if you stick it in while the pan is cold, the steaks are just going to boil, as chefs call it, as we call it. Which basically means, see how waxy they are? Hard to hold on to. Which basically means if you boil, if you're boiling a steak in a pan, you can't boil it in a pan without water. What it boiling means is you're not searing it and getting a good crust on the outside. You're kind of just, you know, just making a weird, you're not searing it. So this is what you normally would do. You'd put them in. We're going to cut them into quarters as I described. So hit my toe with the sweet potato. Actually, halves will be fine. These will cook fairly quick. So now we have our sweet potato halves, which will boil for about 10, 15, 20 minutes. Get on with the knife and season it with salt. Now, you can use a generous amount of salt because these are generous potatoes. So the thing with sweet potatoes is when you boil them, cut them into quarters, cut them into halves, because again, the smaller the pieces are when you boil them, the faster it's going to cook, and the more prep time you have to make other things if you're doing it for Thanksgiving or other dishes for whatever you're doing. Making today. So, seasoning our steaks, we have these sirloin rounds. And to sear in to bring out the flavor of the steaks, we're going to season very liberally, or pretty liberally, with salt and pepper. That's going to ensure that the flavor is going to be brought out in the steaks, and it's going to be tasting fantastic. That's what steak does, is steak brings out the flavor of any food. That's what salt does. So that's why if you don't have a lot of salt in food, it's going to be very, 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 very bland. And we do not want bland food. So to finish it up, I know this looks like a lot of salt, but it's coming out slowly. Now, a bit of fresh ground black pepper. Now we can get a little dirty with it, and the salt and the pepper into the beef, because the more we push it in, the more flavor it's going to bring out. Also, it'll kind of dry the meat just a little, the salt will, to enhance the flavor, and we're going to mop up any seasoning that was spilled onto the board, and then we will have these beautiful sirloin cut rounds that will be ready for the pan in no time. Now I wanted to mention that while sweet potatoes boil, they have a lot of like good fats. They also have a lot of starch. Starch in water boils and can boil over, meaning that foam will come out and spill onto your stove. You don't want that, so blow on it when it starts to foam over, or take it off the heat. Eventually it will subside. Our steaks are good and seasoned. Push that seasoning really in there. Get that nice and ready for the pan. And also, it's a good idea to set your steak or meats out about 20 minutes before you start cooking, so it becomes room temperature and it's not stone cold in the middle. So now it's time for the steak. This is the sirloin round that I'm going to be cooking. We're going to be placing it in a very hot pan. Like I said, very hot pan to seal in the natural juices and flavor of the steak, and season it very good with salt and pepper. Salt is a flavor enhancer. If your food tastes bland, like I said, add some salt. It'll knock it right up. And we season it very well with salt and pepper. I'm letting the pan heat right now. It is very, very hot. A good thing to an identifier as to when to put your meat or steak in, or whatever you're cooking in, is when the pan starts to smoke. It probably won't do it the first time you use it, but after a while, the buildup over the years, no matter how much you clean it, has like a microscopic residue left on the pan, and it'll, when you know it's the right temperature, your pan will start to smoke, and that's when it's nice and hot and ready for the steak. So I'm gonna start with a bit of canola oil. You can use butter. Olive oil is the best. We don't have olive oil here, so I'm opting with canola oil. So just a capful. We don't need that much. We don't want to boil it. Just a capful of oil. You can usually tell when it's ready because the oil will move away from the heat source, as it is doing right now. Let's pop our steaks in. So, these are very, very thick steaks. I gotta hold the pan on there because the pan's broke and it'll tilt if I don't, so I just gotta hold it there. These are gonna take a pretty bit to cook, about 4 minutes on each side to get it through. I'm not gonna cook it all the way through. That's not how I eat my steak. Well, I'll be checking on the potatoes through the process to see how it's cooking and everything, but yeah. Oh, it actually is sitting nicely because of the weight of the steak. It might get a little steamy in here, but that's okay. I'm going to go a little Gordon Ramsay on your butt, and I'm going to put in some thyme. Thyme is a very fragrant herb. This is just, it's an herb. And it's very fragrant. It smells like mint, and as you see, that's what thyme is. So I'm getting ready to put that in with the steaks. It's gonna be great. We're gonna add a knob of butter. This butter will enhance the flavor. Check on our potatoes. Yeah, they're getting done. About another 10-15 minutes, these potatoes will be done. Enough to mash. We're going to get a nice brown crust on the steak. The more you fry it without overcooking it, that crust is going to just be packed with that salt, that pepper, that fresh flavor. Now, once I flip it, I'm going to add in the thyme. That's when it's going to get fancy. I'm checking on our steaks right now. Let's get a little fancy. Let's throw in some thyme. Thyme is going to season I almost said snake. It's going to season the steak beautifully. It's going to add this minty flavor to it. Break it up a bit, throw it over. Now we're going to flip our sirloin. Maybe a little bit more on that one. Thyme will pop on you. It'll start to pop and whatnot, so gotta make sure that's at just the right temperature so you don't burn yourself or burn the thyme. If everything starts to stick on the pan and it starts to burn or whatever, we're gonna add just a bit more oil.